The Crimson Strike. The crimson glow of Harmony Station's destruction painted the void of space in shades of horror. Admiral Crex Valdoris watched from the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, as the final pieces of the human colony scattered into the darkness like dying embers. His scaled hands gripped the tactical rail with satisfaction, yellow eyes gleaming with predatory pleasure. "Excellent precision, Weapons Master," Crex hissed through his translator, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. How many of the humans managed to escape in their pathetic vessels? Weapons Master Yelth checked his readings, his four arms moving gracefully across the holographic displays. Minimal survivors, Admiral. Perhaps 3% of the population reached escape pods before our plasma bombardment reached the station's core. Their defensive capabilities were laughably primitive. Crex's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across this spiral arm of the galaxy for over 2 millennia, absorbing or eliminating species that stood in their path. These humans were just another obstacle, one that would be swept aside like cosmic dust. Their technology was crude, their military organization scattered, and their colonies spread thin across dozens of star systems with minimal coordination. "Signal the secondary fleet," Crex commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge's crystalline architecture. "Begin the assault on New Brisbane. I want that mining colony reduced to atoms within the hour." The tactical display showed the second wave of Zephyrian ships moving into position around the human settlement on New Brisbane's third moon. This colony housed nearly 400,000 humans who had been extracting rare minerals from the moon's core. Crex had studied their operation for months through long-range surveillance. They were efficient workers, he admitted grudgingly, but their defensive systems were outdated by at least 3 centuries compared to Zephyrian technology. As the plasma cannons began their deadly work, Crex reflected on how easy this conquest had been. The Galactic Council had warned him that humans possessed something called unpredictability, but he had seen nothing in their behavior that suggested they were anything more than another primitive species clinging to rocks in space. They built their colonies in predictable patterns, used standard defensive grids, and their military response times were embarrassingly slow. The destruction of New Brisbane took exactly 57 minutes. Crex watched the mining installations collapse under the relentless bombardment, the protective domes cracking like eggshells before the atmosphere blew out into space. The few human ships that attempted to flee were picked off with casual efficiency by his fighter squadrons. "Admiral," Communications Officer Zenth reported, her voice carrying a note of slight confusion, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the human colonies. They appear to be warning signals." Crex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Warning signals? To whom?" "Their nearest military installation is 6 systems away, and their fastest ships would take weeks to reach us. Let them send their pathetic messages into the void." But something in Zent's expression made him pause. "What exactly are they transmitting?" "The signals are highly encrypted, Admiral, but our analysis suggests they're not distress calls. They appear to be activation codes of some kind, broadcasting across multiple frequency ranges to destinations throughout this sector and beyond." Before Crex could respond, the tactical display lit up with new contacts. His sensor officer, a young Zephyrian named Quilks, turned from his station with visible confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual readings from the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. The rocks are moving." Crex strode to the sensor station, his confidence beginning to waver. On the display, dozens of asteroids were indeed changing course, their trajectories converging on his fleet's position. But asteroids didn't move on their own, unless— "Those aren't asteroids," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the translator. As if responding to his words, the asteroids began to unfold. What had appeared to be natural space debris revealed itself as camouflaged human installations, hidden mining platforms, disguised weapon arrays, and concealed monitoring stations had been watching his every move since he'd entered the system. Impossible, Krex snarled. Our intelligence reported no significant human military presence in this sector. Quilx's voice shook as he delivered his report. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups from at least 40 separate installations. They've been running silent, using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered before. The first salvo caught the Zephyrian fleet completely off guard. Instead of the energy weapons they expected, the humans unleashed something far more devastating. Pure kinetic force. Railgun projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed tore through Zephyrian shields as if they didn't exist. The shields had been designed to deflect energy-based attacks, not solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. 3 of Krex's destroyers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by tungsten rods that hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as multiple impacts struck its hull, sending cascading failures through its primary systems. Return fire, Krex roared, but his weapons master was already working frantically at his console. Our targeting systems can't lock onto them. Admiral, they're using some kind of electromagnetic interference that's scrambling our sensors, and they're moving in patterns that violate standard orbital mechanics. On the view screen, Krex watched in growing horror as human vessels emerged from hiding places throughout the system. These weren't the crude, slow ships his intelligence had reported. These were sleek, fast craft that moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of decades of preparation. Captain Sarah Chen's voice cut through the chaos as it was broadcast directly to Krex's flagship. She appeared on his communication screen, a middle-aged human woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that burned with cold fury. Admiral Krex Valdoris of the Zephyrian Empire, she said, her voice steady despite the battle raging around them. You have committed an act of unprovoked aggression against peaceful human colonies. You have murdered nearly 500,000 innocent civilians. This was your first mistake. Krex found his voice, though it came out as more of a hiss. Your hidden weapons won't save you, human. One system's defenses cannot stand against the might of the Empire. Sarah's expression didn't change. You're absolutely right, Admiral. One system couldn't stop you, but you made a second mistake. You assumed we were just one system. The tactical display exploded with new contacts. Jump signatures were appearing throughout the system, not dozens, but hundreds. Ships emerged from hyperspace with the precision of a military drill, taking positions that had clearly been planned months in advance. But these weren't just military vessels. Krex's trained eye could identify converted cargo haulers, mining ships with weapons grafted onto their hulls, and even what appeared to be civilian transports bristling with improvised armaments. Impossible, he whispered. Our intelligence network spans this entire sector. We would have detected such a large military buildup. Sarah smiled, an expression that sent ice through Krex's veins. That's because there was no military buildup, Admiral. These aren't soldiers. They're farmers, miners, teachers, engineers, shopkeepers, and retirees. They're parents whose children lived on Harmony Station. They're grandparents whose families worked the mines on New Brisbane. As if to prove her point, one of the converted freighters opened a communication channel. The face that appeared was that of an elderly human male, his weathered features speaking of decades of hard work. This is Captain Rodriguez of the cargo vessel Maria's Hope, the old man said, his voice heavy with grief and determination. My daughter lived on Harmony Station with her 2 children. They were in the school section when you monsters opened fire. More channels opened. A young woman piloting a converted mining vessel. My brother was a teacher on New Brisbane. He was helping children evacuate when your bombs fell. A gruff-voiced man from what looked like a repurposed civilian transport. 3 generations of my family worked those colonies. You killed them all. Krex realized with growing dread that he wasn't facing a military fleet. He was facing something far more dangerous. An entire civilization that had just learned to hate his species with the focused intensity that only comes from profound loss. You see, Admiral, Sarah continued, you made a fundamental miscalculation about humanity. You assumed we were weak because our individual colonies seemed defenseless. You assumed we were primitive because our technology looked crude. But you fail to understand the most important thing about humans. Another wave of kinetic projectiles slammed into Krex's fleet. This time, the impacts were precisely coordinated, targeting critical systems with surgical accuracy. His command ship's engines went offline, followed by primary weapons and navigation. "When you attack one of us," Sarah said, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute conviction, "you attack all of us." The last thing Krex saw before his flagship's main screen went dark was the image of Earth rising in the distance, its blue and white surface seeming to pulse with hidden power. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had managed to coordinate a response across multiple star systems in a matter of hours. As emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red shadows, Krex realized that the Zephyrian Empire had just made the greatest tactical error in its 2,000-year history. They hadn't attacked a collection of scattered, weak colonies. They had awakened humanity. The Awakening Storm. Director James Morrison stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Council, his weathered hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to unleash. The holographic display before him showed the real-time tactical situation across 17 star systems, each one now crawling with human vessels converging on the Zephyrian fleet. "Director," his aide whispered urgently, "the sleeping giant protocol has been active for 6 hours. Every human settlement from the core worlds to the outer rim has responded. We have over 12,000 vessels in various stages of deployment." Morrison nodded grimly. The sleeping giant protocol had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for 30 years. After first contact with hostile alien species, human leaders had realized that their scattered colonial approach made them vulnerable to exactly this kind of attack. The solution had been elegant in its simplicity. Every human settlement, no matter how remote or peaceful, maintained hidden defensive capabilities and instant communication networks. "Patch me through to Admiral Chen," Morrison ordered. Sarah Chen's face appeared on the screen, streaked with sweat and determination. Behind her, the bridge of her command vessel hummed with activity as crew members coordinated the largest military response in human history. "Status report, Admiral," Morrison said simply. "The Zephyrian assault fleet is completely surrounded, Director. They've managed to disable 3 of their capital ships and roughly 60% of their escort vessels. But, sir," Sarah paused, her expression troubled, "they're not surrendering. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a final assault run toward Earth itself." Morrison felt ice form in his stomach. How many ships are we talking about? Their remaining fleet still numbers over 300 vessels, including their flagship. If they break through our containment, they could reach Earth in 18 hours. Understood. Initiate Phase 2 of the protocol. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Even she hadn't known there was a Phase 2. "Sir, Admiral, what do you know about humanity's colonial expansion over the past 50 years? We've established over 400 settlements across 93 star systems, agricultural worlds, mining colonies, research stations, trading posts. That's what we wanted everyone to believe," Morrison said quietly. "The truth is more complex. Admiral, how do you think we managed to coordinate a response across multiple star systems in a matter of hours? How did converted cargo ships manage to install military-grade weaponry without anyone noticing?" As if in response to his question, the tactical display updated with new information. Sarah stared at the readings in disbelief. "Director, I'm seeing massive energy signatures from everywhere. Agricultural worlds, trading stations, even asteroid mining operations. These readings suggest military-grade infrastructure that would take decades to build." Morrison smiled grimly. 53 years, to be precise. "Sarah, humanity learned something important from our early encounters with hostile species. We learned that looking weak while actually being strong is far more effective than looking strong while being weak." Across the galaxy, the true scope of human preparation began to reveal itself. On the agricultural world of New Harmony, vast wheat fields suddenly parted to reveal launch silos containing long-range missile systems. The trading station at Crossroads Junction opened hidden bays containing squadrons of military fighters. Even the seemingly harmless research outpost at Kepler's Edge unveiled particle beam arrays capable of striking targets across interstellar distances. Admiral Crex Valdoris watched this revelation unfold from his crippled flagship with growing horror. His remaining fleet was trapped in what he now realized was the most sophisticated military trap in galactic history. Everywhere his sensors looked, they found more human installations, more weapons, more coordination. Admiral, his communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "We're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." Director Morrison's face appeared on Crex's view screen, flanked by representatives from every major human colony. The Zephyrian leader recognized some of them from intelligence files. Governors, corporate executives, military commanders, even religious leaders. But they all shared the same expression of absolute determination. "Admiral Crex," Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "I am Director Morrison of the Earth Defense Council. You have committed acts of war against the human species. You have murdered our civilians and destroyed our homes. Under normal circumstances, this would mean the complete annihilation of your fleet." Crex found his voice, though it emerged as little more than a croak. "Your species, this level of preparation, it's impossible. Our intelligence networks span dozens of civilizations. How did you hide this from us?" Morrison's expression softened slightly, as if he was speaking to a confused child. "Admiral, you made the same mistake that many species have made when encountering humanity. You assumed that because we appeared scattered and weak, we actually were scattered and weak. You fail to understand that humans have spent 300,000 years learning to cooperate in the face of existential threats." The tactical display showed the true scope of human coordination. Ships from agricultural worlds worked seamlessly with vessels from mining colonies. Corporate security forces operated in perfect synchronization with colonial militias. Even civilian craft had been integrated into the defensive network with military precision. "You see," Morrison continued, "humanity learned long ago that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our individual courage. It's our ability to work together when survival is at stake. Every human settlement you've observed over the past decades has been part of a larger network. Every weak colony has been connected to every other colony through communication systems, supply chains, and mutual defense agreements that your intelligence services never detected because they weren't looking for cooperation on this scale." Captain Sarah Chen's voice joined the conversation from her position coordinating the encirclement. "Admiral Crex, let me give you some numbers. In the past 8 hours, we've mobilized over 1,500 combat vessels, 3,000 support ships, and roughly 2 million personnel. This represents less than 12% of humanity's total defensive capability." Crex's scaled hands trembled as he processed this information. 2 million. Impossible. The total human population across all colonies is barely 40 million. "Actually," Morrison said calmly, "the total human population is closer to 120 million. We've been underreporting our numbers for decades. And yes, Admiral, roughly 1 in 60 humans has some form of military training. We learned that lesson from our own history." As if to demonstrate human coordination, the encircling fleet began a complex maneuver that would have been impossible without extensive preparation. Ships that had never operated together moved in perfect formation, creating an ever-tightening net around the Zephyrian forces. But it was what happened next that truly shattered Crex's understanding of human nature. Instead of pressing their overwhelming advantage, the human fleet stopped. "Admiral Crex," Morrison said, his voice now carrying a different tone, "despite what you've done to our people, humanity is offering you a choice. You can surrender your fleet and submit to trial for war crimes, or you can continue fighting and face complete annihilation. But there's a third option." Crex's confusion must have shown on his face, because Morrison continued with something that might have been sympathy. The third option is that you help us prevent this from happening again. Admiral, your empire has been expanding through conquest for 2 millennia. How many species have you destroyed? How many civilizations have been wiped out because they couldn't defend themselves? For the first time since the battle began, Krex felt something other than fear or rage. The human was offering him redemption. You're suggesting an alliance? After what we've done? I'm suggesting that even monsters can choose to become something better, Morrison replied. Your empire's expansion has created a power vacuum in this sector. Worse species than yours are moving in to fill that vacuum. Species that wouldn't offer surrender as an option. Admiral Chen's tactical display showed new contacts at the edge of the system. Long-range sensors had detected the approach of ships bearing the distinctive energy signatures of the Vortex swarm, a species that made the Zephyrian Empire look benevolent by comparison. Admiral Krex, Sarah said urgently, we're detecting Vorthak advanced scouts. They're probably here to scavenge whatever's left after they assumed we'd destroyed each other. If they establish a foothold in this sector, every living world within 50 light years becomes a feeding ground. Krex knew the Vorthak by reputation. They didn't conquer worlds. They consumed them, stripping every trace of organic matter before moving on to the next system. His own empire had fought them briefly, decades ago, and barely survived the encounter. What are you proposing? He asked quietly. Morrison leaned forward. Help us drive them off. Prove that your empire can choose cooperation over conquest. In return, humanity will consider a non-aggression pact and limited trade agreements. Your people can continue to exist and even prosper, but as partners rather than conquerors. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell silent except for the hum of damaged systems. Krex looked around at his officers, seeing fear, confusion, and something that might have been hope in their expressions. And if we refuse, he asked, then you'll face the Vorthak alone, Sarah said simply, because humanity will have no choice but to treat you as a continuing threat to our existence. Krex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 2 millennia of imperial expansion. His species had built their identity around conquest and domination. Could they learn to build something else? How do I know your offer is genuine? He asked finally. Morrison smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Because, Admiral, that's what humans do. We turn enemies into allies. We turn conflicts into cooperation. It's why we've survived as a species despite every disadvantage the universe has thrown at us. The Vortex scouts were getting closer. Soon, they would have to make a decision that would determine the fate of multiple civilizations. Admiral Krex, Sarah said softly, what's it going to be? Krex looked at the tactical display one more time, seeing the overwhelming human force that surrounded his fleet, but also seeing the approaching Vorthak threat that endangered everyone in the system. Signal the fleet, he said finally. Stand down weapons and prepare for joint operations. It seems the Zephyrian Empire is about to learn what it means to fight alongside humans. As the 2 fleets began coordinating their defense against the approaching Vortex swarm, Director Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had once again proven that their greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to turn today's enemy into tomorrow's ally. The galaxy was about to learn that when you attack humanity, you don't just wake up a sleeping giant. You wake up a sleeping giant that's really good at making friends.